एकम् अक्षरम् हृदि निरन्तरम् भासते स्वयं लिख्यते हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् अहम् इति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जता पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो देहं मृण्मय जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तथ भावशुक्तिसमये सिद्धा वसद्धा ओहं भावयुत कुतो रतिः दृष्टात्मनष्टात्मना सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचलशिवः पूर्वो विभाति स्वयं सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचलशिवः पूर्वो विभाति स्वयं. Namo Ramana. In this, the Thursday satsang from Ramana Maharshi Center for Learning, we have been reading from Guruvachaka Kovai, the work by Muruganar Swamigal. We have been reading 2 verses selected for us. Each verse reading will be followed by a short meditation on its meaning, and that will be followed by the actual practice of Atma Vicharam for 10 minutes. After these 2 segments of verse reading, meditation on meaning, and the practice of Bhagavan's teaching in Atma Vicharam are completed, there will be summing up remarks by Shri Venkatesh Deshpande ji, and that shall be followed by the offering of Sri Ramanashtotram. The chanting will be by Vaibhavji and Prarthnama, and the floral offering will be by Shri Manjunath ji from right here. We begin this evening's satsang by taking the first verse, verse number 8, selected for us. Verse number 8 falls in the prefatory verses. The whole work has been classified by Muruganar Swamigal. After the prefatory verses, we have the investigation into truth, then meditation on the truth, and finally the last segment, the experience of the truth. This verse, verse number 8, we find in the prefatory verses, third subsegment, benefit of the work. Benefit of this work called Guru Vachaka Kovai. Muruganar Swamigal says, since the Supreme Self exists as all there is nothing whatsoever for it to attain. Since the Supreme Self exists as all there is nothing whatsoever for it to attain. Therefore, the benefit of this lamp of supreme truth is to bring about total cessation of mental movements towards dharma, artha, and kama. There are substantial notes to this, so we will go through that before coming back to the verse. Traditional scriptures have identified 4 acceptable goals or ways of life. Dharma, the performance of social duties in an ethical way. Artha, the acquisition of wealth through righteous means. Kama, the happiness derived from sensual enjoyments. Moksha, liberation, the natural state of abiding as the self. Bhagavan is saying here that the self is eternally attained or realized, and that one knows this when the mind stops running towards dharma, artha, and kama. Having a mind that no longer pursues these 3 is the benefit of reading this work. A similar idea appears in verse 1204 of this work. The following story narrated by Kanakamal expands on this theme. In it, the following works and authors are mentioned. Thiruvalluvar, also called as Valluvar, author of Tirukural, also abbreviated as Kural, an ancient Tamil book on Dharma, Artha, and Kama. Idaikadar and Avayar, who are contemporaries of Thiruvalluvar, were distinguished Tamil poet saints. This is a beautiful anecdote which highlights the brevity of Tirukural and the brevity that Avayar brings forth to spiritual teachings. Once Bhagavan's devotees were discussing Thiruvalluvar's skill in condensing the greatest truths into the shortest of verses. Someone mentioned that Idaikada, one of the famous poets of Sangam age, had composed a verse in praise of Thiruvalluvar's unique ability. Idaikada says, so much wisdom has been condensed into such compact verses that it seems as though Thiruvalluvar has drilled a hole in a single mustard seed and filled it with all the waters of the 7 seas. Bhagavan, who was listening to this discussion, turned to Muruganar and said, hasn't Avayar condensed the Kural even further? To this query, Muruganar replied, yes, indeed. Avayar has composed a poem of amazing brevity and unmatched beauty. It is an interesting story. Once a group of poets were discussing the greatness of Thiruvalluvar and the unique nature of Tirukural. Avayar was asked to give her opinion. She said, all of you seem to be highly impressed by the so-called brevity of Tirukural. But is it really so concise and compact? Can a collection of 1330 couplets divided into 133 chapters be thought of as being brief or concise? I cannot see the need for so many verses just to tell us about virtue, wealth, and happiness, dharma, artha, and kama. In my opinion, their Tirukural is unnecessarily long composition, says our Avayar. The other poets were taken aback by Avayar's words. They did not believe that the matter in Tirukural could possibly be condensed any further. So they challenged Avayar to compose a really short poem which could be considered equal to Tirukural in brevity, clarity, and beauty. Immediately, Avayar responded with the following poem: Dharma is to give generously. Artha is to earn wealth without resorting to unethical means, unethical methods. Kama is the consequence of a loving couple whose minds have become one and who are ever devoted to each other. The supreme blissful moksha is the state in which these three have been abandoned by meditation on the Supreme. Muruganar said, whereas Valluvar had dealt with the three subjects of virtue, wealth, and happiness, Avayar has included liberation also in her 4-line poem. All the other poets were speechless with wonder. Bhagavan thoroughly enjoyed and endorsed the meaning of the verse. And that's what this work, Guru Vachaka Kovai and Bhagavan's teachings, does for us. The whole circuitous route that we might have taken or we may be embarking on in Dharma, Artha, and Kama are now made the direct path of holding the eye. All these have to be held only after the rise of the ego from the Supreme Self. Now, question that rise itself, asks Bhagavan, that the total cessation of mental movements towards Dharma, Artha, and Kama. So, we were discussing a few moments ago about how Bhagavan's teachings brings us from the Stula to the Sukshma, that from the sensory world and the senses where the Dharma, Artha, and Kama, that is the field. From there, Bhagavan says to those who cannot directly do Atma Vicharam, says observe the breath. Observe the breath, which is more Sukshma than the sensory world, but it is Stula, it is coarse compared to mind. But observe the breath so that the mind can quieten down. Then what he asks us to do? Now that the quietening of the breath cannot take us to the source of the mind, because mind is of subtle nature. So with the quietened mind, start manasa mana alokya. That is, look at the mind with the mind itself, says Bhagavan. So the seeing self obviously has to be sukshma compared to the seen thought. Again, Bhagavan's rule of letting go of the stula and holding the sukshma. Whenever thought appears, do not pursue it. We were discussing downstairs that the Annamalai Swami's incident, where Annamalai Swami gives a blow to one of the workers there, whom he is supervising, who has, with some deliberateness perhaps, broken a stone which was to be properly cut so that it will be used for a particular purpose. This instruction has been given by Bhagavan to Annamalai Swami, and Annamalai Swami has carefully passed it on to the worker, and the worker has broken the stone, and on seeing that, Annamalai Swami angrily gives him a blow, but that's not going away from his mind till the evening. And every evening, he comes and reports to Bhagavan whatever has happened during the day. So he goes back to this incident and says, Bhagavan, I should not have hit him. I should not have hit him. Then Bhagavan says, that has happened in the morning. Now why do you carry it? Take it to the Atma. Ask for whom is this thought. Now, the doubt that can come to a dharmi is that when we follow dharma, is that would it not be necessary to say that hereafter I will not make this mistake again. Hereafter I will not allow anger to come and interfere with my dealing with the workers. Is that not the dharma I should think of? Is directly taking to the Atma? How is it connected with that? And the connection is that by having dharma in mind, that hereafter I will not do this, we bring in the element of time, and that thought also has to be taken to the Atma, which is the source of all past, all present, and all the future. Since the whole of time is contained in the self, using dharma and allowing oneself the lenience of taking time to correct oneself is still involved in that area of time, whereas self-attention corrects oneself completely by going to the source of everything. That is, even if we have a thought, oh, hereafter I should not do it, that is the proper apology or proper repentance, that hereafter I should not repeat this mistake. One should be attentive there and ask, for whom is this thought? It is for me. Who am I? The source of all of time to come, in which I was planning to implement the rule, is here, is in the self. That is why the benefit of this work, says Muruganar Swamigal, is to draw back the mind from those three areas, dharma, artha, and kama, in which it is outward turned and feels that something other than itself is going to give it the happiness. In this teaching, in this work called Guru Vachakakkovai, the mind will be drawn back from all that, and like Avayar's verse condensing 1330 verses, the whole journey in all the worlds is going to be condensed by Bhagavan by asking us to attend to the self. In whichever world you are, in that world somebody will be sitting and sharing self-inquiry with you, he says. Because the Atma will be there, and the Atma Loka, where the Atma itself is that which is seen, is the Paramaloka, beyond which there is no world. Any other world has to be completely absorbed in the Atma. Till then, the world will keep appearing and one will have to do self-inquiry. So Bhagavan says, the now itself start practicing this, that whenever you see something other than you, inquire, for whom is this thought? Who am I? Then what happens to dharma, artha, and kama? All that will be in the eyes of others who want to connect the dots. Oh, this fellow is behaving more dharmically now. He is behaving more, he is writing accounts and all properly and maintaining everything. So the artha part is also taken care. All that will be in the eyes of others. But one is merely attending to the self, and whatever has to happen in that sannidhi, it happens by automatic divine activity. It is only in the eyes of the others that the title, that so and so is a sannyasi, so and so is a kudumbi, so and so is a dharmic kudumbi, all this is only for in the eyes of the imaginary others, for one's own consumption. That imaginary other and whatever they think of is also only the Atma. So the mind is drawn back from all the outgoings and is fixed in the self. That is the benefit of this work. Since the Supreme Self exists as all there is, the self is everything. It is this, that, everything, middle, and everything is only the self. There is nothing whatsoever for the self to attain. Therefore, the benefit of this lamp of supreme truth is to bring total cessation of mental movements towards dharma, artha, and kama, says Bhagavan. And with his immense grace, let us sit and practice that. Practice the self-attention in the practice of Atma Vicharam. Revatima, you'll set the time for us, 10 minutes. Okay. Ramana, we go ahead the satsang by taking the second verse selected for us, verse number 1044. 1044. We find this in the last segment, experience of the truth. And the subheading is Atma Swarupa. 1044. One's real nature is being consciousness. One's real nature is being consciousness. Verse 1044. The many ego selves rise falsely and perform without really performing virtuous and evil deeds and wander in samsara. The many ego selves rise falsely and perform without really performing virtuous and evil deeds and wander in samsara. Through the suffering caused by the mind, they grow weary without really getting wearied. That which remains as the substratum for this is the self, the non-dual being that is wholly conscious. The many ego selves rise falsely and perform without really performing virtuous and evil deeds and wander in samsara. Through the suffering caused by the mind, they grow weary without really getting wearied. That which remains as the substratum for this is the self, the non-dual being that is wholly conscious, wholly consciousness. So, the reality is being consciousness. That is Irundolir. When Bhagavan talks about Arunachala in Ashtakam, Bhagavan calls Arunachala or the Ishvara as Irundu Olir, being consciousness. And that is the reality, that is the unchanging reality. We can always recall Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva, Visishyate. That which is drawn from the existence consciousness is really only existence consciousness. But it imagines itself, the Jiva Bhava, it imagines itself to be separate from the being consciousness. How does this happen? The need for the Jiva, the false need or the apparent need. Because in this verse, Muruganar Swami is actually freeing us from all the doership. The doership is not really there for the Jiva, though it feels it is there. Now, all the story of doing this or doing that begin by the Jiva feeling that it is separate from the source, from the being consciousness. Not only this feeling that it is separate from the source and thereby its true nature is veiled, it now catches hold of a part of the projections and says that this is me and this is not me. And in the not me area it says, these are mine, these are my people, these are not my people. So this is how the Jiva falsely seems to perform, though it is really not performing. So all the doings we have done gets erased in one stretch, in one go, when we abide in the self. The many ego selves rise falsely. So the rising itself is false. That's why Bhagavan, whenever asked that where are we going to go after death? What is going to happen to us after death? Bhagavan will always ask a return question. See if you are born now, or are you born now? Are you separated from your source? Only if you falsely think you are separate from the source, you will have to ask where I will have to go. When you take the spiritual bath of going back to the source, of being as the self, being abiding as the self, then whatever there is only the Purna Vastu. That everything is bliss is actually the experience when one is unmoving. So all the movements are seen as false. The rising from the Supreme is seen as false. The many ego selves rise falsely and perform without really performing virtuous and evil deeds. So one is not to separate out the good people from the bad people in this enquiry. All jivas have the same story or have the same problem, that they feel that they are separate from the real doer or the real being, and falsely feel that they are doing virtuous deeds or they are doing evil deeds. Both are false. And what happens is that whether virtuous deeds are done or whether evil deeds are done, the mind gets varied with this. By the time the nature, Prakriti, takes us to evening, the do-gooder as well as the do-eviler are both tired, are both varied. But really, their reality is the unvaried self, the unchanging Atman. So that the wariness is also false. The wariness that comes with old age, the wariness with doing so many things, good or bad, that wariness is also false and it is not present in the being consciousness. They grow weary without really getting wearied. So whenever we get a thought of how tired we are, how tired, actually the tiredness is of the body, that does not take the existence consciousness away. It does not touch the source. So it is only our attachment to the relative form that makes us feel weary. So slowly, gradually, we'll have to apply Bhagavan's teachings, practice Bhagavan's teachings, where the consciousness learns that it is only by gripping these conditional existences that I feel I am going to die, that I feel that I am tired, I am a jiva, and I have to move from this and I have to become that. All this come because of the root false notion that we have risen separate from the source. And the solution Bhagavan gives is that abide in the source by taking this as the sole sadhana, that for whom is this thought, who am I? It gives us the udasina bhava, that whenever the action or weariness comes to mind, the consciousness learns to free itself. When somebody asks that when I am walking, how to do self-inquiry, then Bhagavan says, why do you think you are walking? Why do you think you are doing this or doing that? You pay attention to the self. That itself is self-attention there, that self-inquiry there, that the walking goes on automatically in self-attention. Now only if you identify with the Jiva Bhava that you are walking, then that action and its wariness come and attach itself to you. Whereas the consciousness should learn to detach itself, to free itself. And what is the real nature of consciousness? Real nature of consciousness is eternal existence consciousness. Irund olir. It does not have any other state, anything other than that. Only Irundolir is there. Therefore, there is no question of doing virtuous deeds, or evil deeds, or get varied by them. The self-attention takes us to being consciousness, and when all the falsities, the vasanas, are eliminated by self-inquiry, then one is naturally in being consciousness. This Purana is natural. And Bhagavan says, even when his body was working, even obviously good deeds, obviously those good deeds, when they were going on, Bhagavan says, the self-attention that I am the deathless spirit never left him. The identity that I am the deathless spirit, that to me neither is there doing nor is there varying, that never left him. And the fundamental Shruti note was always there. So the identity was there even when the actions were going on. And that is where Bhagavan is taking us through his Upadesham. That you are really not the Jiva who falsely feels separated from the source and falsely seems to be so much interested in doing this good or gaining something from doing something evil, and as a result feeling varied. You are not that. You are that consciousness which is Udasinaya Namaha, which is seated above this plane of action and tiredness and birth and death, and is untouched, untrammeled in its being consciousness. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us turn inward towards that, towards our truth, and drop all these falsities by practicing Atma Ucharam. This is what will happen. The Jiva Bhava drops, and one realizes the true nature, which is existence consciousness, which is self-luminous. It is not holding on to something and living. It is living by itself. It is life itself, eternal life. It is eternal being, which is full of consciousness. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice for 10 minutes. Revatima, you will help us out with the time. request Venkateshji to give us the summing up remarks. Usually, Akka and Venkateshji, they give beautiful different perspectives to the same verse. It is really a blessing to listen to them. Namaramana sir.
Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. ध्यानमूलं गुरोर्मूर्तिः पूजामूलं गुरोर्पदम् मन्त्रमूलं गुरुर्वाक्यं मोक्षमूलं गुरोर्कृपा मोक्षमूलं गुरोर्कृपा नमो रमण. So in these two verses, there are, obviously, as what Nandakumar has beautifully said, there are three aspects, and the fourth also, which has been spoken about. What, if we look at our lives, if you see our lives, we have always, everybody said, do dharma, do dharma, do things right, okay? Do unto others what you want others want others to do unto you. That has been our cornerstone. That has been the thing that we have always believed in, and saying that we should always do things right. We should never do anything wrong, and follow dharma. But if you really look, if you all of us have come to Bhagwan and see what the situation is. So first of all, Bhagwan says there's no another. So he says that you think there is dharma. That means there is you and there is somebody else, and then you have to do good to somebody else. And Bhagwan says when you do self-inquiry and go inside and realize you are that Satchidananda Atman, then everything is only that Satchidananda Atman. Everything is happening in you, the consciousness. Then what happens to dharma? Dharma goes out of the window. There is no more dharma because it is important, but suddenly it has absolutely a totally a different meaning altogether. So the thing where Bhagavan says there's no another, there's only you, then dharma has a totally different meaning. The same thing with artha. We seek wealth. We seek to earn so much of money throughout our lives. We earn maybe. Some people say I want 10 lakhs, somebody says 50 lakhs, somebody says 1 crore. If I have 1 crore, I'm going to resign, I'm going to stop working. Ask those people who have earned 1 crore whether they the next day will stop working. They would not stop working because what happens, the mind won't allow them to stop working. But Bhagavan suddenly brings a twist in this whole thing. He says, hey, why are you looking for this wealth which is there in, it's like just lying in the savings bank account, or there's some other wealth lying in somewhere else. You have to look for the wealth that never decreases, the wealth that never perishes, the wealth that the more you give, this is a beautiful thing. The more you give, the more you get. It's unbelievable. Imagine you have a lakh of rupees and you're giving every time 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. In 10 times, your 1 lakh is going to become zero. That's for sure. But the wealth of the self is wealth which is inexhaustible. It is there. It's always there, available to each one of us. So this artha also has a different meaning altogether. The physical wealth that we always were thinking about has a new meaning of the spiritual wealth, which is the wealth of the self. The third one which is the most interesting, is the karma, which is the happiness. Oh, we're always seeking happiness. We want happiness. I want to do a PhD because it's going to give me happiness. I will earn more money because it's going to happen. It'll give me happiness. I will go abroad because it gives me happiness. I'll spend time with my children because it gives me happiness. Happiness, happiness, happiness. And then what happens? You become weary at one point and say, where is this happiness? I'm seeking this happiness and I don't seem to be happy having this. Then Bhagwan says, hey, puts a mirror in front of us and says, look, look, where you're looking for happiness. You have to look for happiness within. Oh, really? Oh, yes. So once you have to look for happiness within, and he says that your Nija Swarupa is happiness. Forget about anything else. One thing is we were looking for something outside and we wanted to catch hold of something which will give us happiness. Then Bhagavan says, you fool Venkatesh, go inside. And there you are, your Nija Swarupa is happiness. You are happiness. So why are you looking for it outside? So all these three of dharma, artha, and kama have absolutely a different meaning when you come to Bhagwan and when you do self-inquiry, because the meanings that are traditionally there with virtue, wealth, and happiness, suddenly you feel that everything is within each one of us. So that's what was beautifully said by Avayar also, that she finally said the supremely blissful moksha is the state in which these three have been abandoned by the meditation on the Supreme. So once you go inside, Bhagavan says, Avayar says, then what happens? These three are no more things that bother you anymore because they are part of this supreme reality, which is you. So that's what Bhagavan beautifully says. We forget this, and it reminds me regularly when Bhagavan gave his first Upadeshas to his mother. He says, based on prarabdha, whatever is to happen will happen. Whatever is not to happen will never happen. Best thing is to be silent. Summa ira. See, Avayar said, so made a huge statement. Dharma is to give generously, and all. She made a huge statement. Bhagwan finally enjoyed it. But look at Bhagwan's thing for all artha, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. He said, Iru, just be. You don't have to do anything else. So that is what we have to do in our sadhana. Just be. If we are, if we are just being, then we are not doing. We are not getting. We are not giving. We are not. All those other things are not there in the era. So Bhagwan says that if you are self-attentive and if you go within and be with the self, then you are being with God. If you are being with God, then all these things are being taken care of. This dharma, artha, kama, moksha, all will be taken care of. He doesn't, though he beautifully says, Muruganar says that Bhagwan thoroughly enjoyed and endorsed the meaning of the verse. But at another level, Bhagwan saying, telling each one of us, just be and iru. And once we understand that, that is the purpose of all our sadhana. And once we understand that, then what happens? We are always in touch with the self. Once we are in touch with the self, then whatever this instrument has to do, whether it has to do something the dharma, it has to do a kama, moksha, whatever it has to be done, that will be done by that self, by the consciousness. That will Prarabdha will go on. Prarabdha will go on this body. But who is the doer? The doer is no more Venkatesh. He's the Satchidananda Atman that will keep on doing whatever is to be done through this body. And each one of us have to hold on the self. If you're holding on to the self, then we are doing the highest good for each one of us as well as for the entire universe. So that's what Bhagwan is trying to tell us this evening. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana, sir. Thank you very much. Namo Ramana Vaibhavji and Prarthana. Can we start the chanting?
Yes. Namo Ramana. भारद्वाज विश्वनाथ विरचितम् श्री रमणाष्टोत्तर शतनामावलिः अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिराशे यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि ॐ महासेन महंसेन जाताय नमः ॐ श्रीरमणाय नमः ॐ गुरवे विष्णवे नमः। ॐ अखण्डसंविदाकाराय नमः। ॐ महौजसे नमः। ॐ कारणोद्भवाय नमः। ॐ जगद्हितावताराय नमः। ॐ श्रीभूमिनाथस्थलोस्थिताय नमः। ॐ पराशरकुलोत्तंसाय नमः। ॐ सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः। ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः। ॐ सहायाम्बा सहायवते नमः। ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः। ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः। ॐ श्रीमद्द्वादशान्तमहास्थले लब्धविद्योदयाय नमः। ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः। ॐ तीव्राय नमः। ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते नमः। ॐ पितुरादेशतः शोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः। ॐ तपोमयाय नमः। ॐ उदासीनाय नमः। ॐ महायोगिने नमः। ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः। ॐ कुशाग्रधिये नमः। ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसम्रम्भाय नमः। ॐ सुसन्दृशे नमः। ॐ सवित्रे नमः। ॐ स्थिराय नमः। ॐ तपक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः। ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः। ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः। ॐ चूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ॐ चूर्णिताखिलविभ्रमाय नमः। ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः। ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः। ॐ त्रिगुणातिगाय नमः। ॐ विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः। ॐ विराजदचलाकृतये नमः। ॐ उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः। ॐ पूर्णाय नमः। ॐ रचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः। ॐ गम्भीराय नमः। ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः। ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणास्य निभाय नमः। ॐ धीराय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ॐ स्वराजे नमः। ॐ महर्षये नमः। ॐ भगवते नमः। ॐ ईड्याय नमः। ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः। ॐ विमलाय नमः। ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः। ॐ आप्ताय नमः। ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः। ॐ समदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्याय नमः। ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः। ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः। ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः। ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः। ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ॐ दयार्णवाय नमः। ॐ श्रीशोणाचलरिद्भूतस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः। ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेष्ट्रे नमः। ॐ तद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः। ॐ गणेशमुनिभृङ्गेन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः। ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्न संशयाय नमः। ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः। ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः। ॐ सौम्याय नमः। ॐ आत्मवते नमः। ॐ सर्वावनिमतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः। ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः। ॐ महाभागाय नमः। ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः। ॐ विनताय नमः। ॐ विनुताय नमः। ॐ विप्राय नमः। ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः। ॐ दर्शनादजसंहारिणे नमः। ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ॐ ऋच्चान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः। ॐ स्मरणात् बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः। ॐ संसारार्णवतारकाय नमः। ॐ शोणादृशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः। ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः। ॐ अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः। ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः। ॐ कमण्डलुधराय नमः। ॐ शूद्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः। ॐ गुहाय नमः। ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः। ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ॐ भवरोगविषग्वराय नमः। ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः। ॐ देवतमाय नमः। ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः। ॐ सेनान्ये नमः। ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमण भगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनाम पूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थानोररुणाचलस्य पदयोः नित्याजनिं प्राप्यत दिव्यानुग्रहसुप्रवाह विवशस्तादात्म्यभावं गतः वृन्निष्ठस्वरभिरनित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनास्येकरान् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नम इदं लोकोत्तरज्योतिषे। ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
नमो 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 रमण सदाशिवप्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि दर्शन सुख मंगल मुख सकल जीवहित सम्मुख ब्रह्म संघिये सदा तुष्ट सदा हृष्ट सदा शिवानन्द पुष्ट परम महर्षि ब्रह्मनिष्ठ समदर्शी नमो 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 रमण सदाशिवप्रभावरण नमो महर्षि ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನವದೊಂದು ಕಾಡು ನೀನರಿತಿಹೆ ಅದರ ಜಾಡು ಹಿತವನರಿತು ನೀಡುತ್ತೆಮ್ಮ ಕೊರೆಯ ತಣಿಸಲೈ ಬೇಡಲೆಂದು ಬಂದ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿಯೇ ತಣಿವೆವಯ್ಯ ಮೋಡಿಗಾರನೇ ಹಿತವ ನುಡಿದು ಪೊರೆ ನಮ್ಮನು ಬ್ರಹ್ಮ ಸಂಘಿಯೇ ನಮೋ 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 ರಮಣ ಸದಾಶಿವ ಪ್ರಭಾವರಣ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ ನಮೋ ಮಹರ್ಷಿ बोलो भगवान श्री रमण महर्षि की जय
ನಮೋ ರಮಣ ಅಕ್ಕ, ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮೋ ರಮಣ.
ನಮೋ